alongside of her fiancé, Todd. It is a murder mystery that has haunted Deborah all these years, and she would like to know what happened that fateful night. Deborah, you say that right before Donna was killed, this was the happiest time of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me about that.
My daughter was... I just want to thank you. First of all, thank you for having me come to your show. My daughter was full of life, absolutely full of life, and I believe that personality and love and life goes on to the other side.
Okay. And she was planning to get married, wasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. She just graduated from high school, David Douglas High in Portland, Oregon. And she just moved in with her fiancé. And so she only lived with him for a short time.
Can you describe the day that she was murdered? I know how hard this is for you, but did anything unusual happen?
I was scheduled to go to a meeting, and my mom usually watches my son. He was 4 at the time, and she had a really bad cold, so it was like God planned it or something to have a cold, because God wanted me to see my daughter and spend some time with her and her little brother. So I asked Donna if she could watch her little brother for a couple hours when I went to my work, because I only lived she only lived about 1.5 miles from my job. And so I dropped him off, and she spent some time with her little brother, and her fiancé too. Spent some time. They even took a walk and everything. He has a very vivid, wonderful memory of the two of them. I came back from my meeting from work, and I spent at least an hour with them, and they were very, very up. The last I saw her alive was she's standing.
He says that 2 years ago, his 14-year-old daughter, Sarah, disappeared into the night, never to be seen again. Jack is scared to death, worrying about where she is and if she's alive, or is she being held against her will? What happened, Jack?
Well, she was planning on visiting a friend for an overnight stay, and her brother was watching TV and says, well, I'll walk you down as soon as the movie's over. She says, okay.
Where was she?
She was at home on the deck
house?
outside the house.
Outside the house.
So she says, okay, when your movie's over, 15 minutes, I'll come and walk you down. Well, the movie was over. He went outside. She was gone. So he just assumed that it's a good neighborhood, no problems. He thought everything was okay. She went to her girlfriend's, which wasn't anything unusual. Come the next day, she didn't return home, so they called the girlfriend, and the girlfriend said, no, there was no plans for her to be there. And then that led to, let's go to the police and find out what's going on.
You found something very interesting.
Yes, because I had been away for the weekend, and before I got home, I asked my son to see if there was anything she left in her room, a note or anything, and it was a note that fortunately they didn't find, but I did when I got home.
Where'd you
2 days
find
later. Pardon me?
Where'd you find the note?
The note was on her bed, right underneath her pillow.
It was written in French.
It was written in French.
Was she a French student?
She was taking French in school, yes.
Well, good enough to write a note.
Apparently, because the people who translated it for me had enough to go on.
We have a copy of the letter that she left behind. Let's listen to what she had to say. 13-year-old daughter, Andrea. Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea. Mine's Andrea. Disappeared in the middle of the day and hasn't been seen since. And this has tormented her, of course, all of these years. You had 2 daughters.
Yes.
What happened?
Actually, it was in the evening, and we had just moved from one part of our little tiny town to another part of our little tiny town, because both girls were seeing some kids that I didn't really like, and I didn't like the way they looked or acted. And yes, and Andy didn't want to go to this new school that she was going to go to, and I said, you can stay at the old school as long as you're at the tennis center when I come pick you up. And right away, the very first day, she wasn't there. So I said, okay, but she came home, and I said, okay, fine, but you're going to the other school. And that was the next day was the day that she disappeared. And she never did go to that school. And when I came home from work, she was home. We didn't find out she didn't go to school till way later. And I had to go to a meeting, and my oldest daughter was going to go with me, and I wanted Andrea to go, but she didn't want to. She wanted to stay home. And I said, okay, fine, do your homework, vacuum if you want to, and we'll see you a little later. We were gone about an hour and a half. And when we came back, the door was unlocked, but there was no sign of forced entry. The vacuum cleaner was still out in the middle of the floor. No vacuuming had been done. We went outside and called for her. I thought maybe she just might have walked outside, or if she went to a neighbor.
And you haven't seen her since?
No.
Was
And
anything missing?
Nothing. Her clothes, I mean, she never went anywhere without her makeup. It was all there, her purse, all of the personal belongings that we knew of were all still
A
there.
year ago, she found her beloved 14-year-old son, Chris, dead. He was lying on the living room floor with a bag over his head. And not knowing how or why this happened has destroyed her life. I can't imagine anything more horrible than finding your son this way. I'm sorry. Tell us what happened that day.
Well, I thought Chris was a very good boy myself. He had 28 trophies in sports by the time he was 13 years old. So I thought he was a very good kid. He was very kind-hearted.
Did you think it was unusual that a few weeks before he died, he asked you to move with him?
I feel like something was bothering Chris because my sister had came in from New Jersey, and during that time he told me that he was talking about a gang, that they wanted him to get into a gang, and he didn't want to get into the gang. And I said, well, Chris, why would you want to get into the gang? He said, I don't want to, Mom, but you don't understand. They beat you in, and I don't want to get into this gang.
All right, let's put that aside. That may be the reason why he wanted to move. Questions?
Can I please say something here?
Surely.
They went further than this. They said, unless you get into this gang, I'm going to kill your whole family.
I believe that.
They said,
I believe that because Chris was very, very protective of me and his brothers and sisters.
You know, they threatened him, and especially one guy that was a leader that had tattoos from here to there, and very wide mouth and very, very flat features, was the ringleader, and he was the one that said.
2 years ago, her mother, Evelyn, whom she loved more than anything, vanished under very mysterious circumstances, and Deborah has been heartbroken ever since. Her mother was 54 years old, and she and her mother were very close. They spoke every day. On the day that she vanished, November 30th, 94.
Sally, wasn't her mother going to get married?
Wow. Mother called and said she was going out of town for a few days, told Deborah mind the jewelry business and get the mail. She said, I'm going to Jerusalem to get married. Now, Mother was not dating anyone, did not have a boyfriend, so Deborah laughed that Mother was joking. Mother said she'd be back on Sunday, and then she said something else strange. She said, when I come back, I'm going to give you my house, you and your husband, my house. And again, it was a joke, so she laughed. Why would her mother give her the house? Mother said she'd be back on Sunday. She called her mother all day Sunday. She went to the airport, and she found Mother's car parked in long-term parking. And with security, they opened the car. No struggle, nothing. She wasn't abducted, but Mother's shoes were in the driver's seat. She checked the airport, and there was no record of anybody buying a ticket or anything. She has appeared on local television stations, called the police and reported her mother missing, and called every friend in her mother's phone book. Did Mother have any enemies?
She was loved by everybody.
She suspects her mother has passed on because
She has.
the mother would never,
Have left her daughter alone this long without making contact.
or the grandchildren.
That's right.
or the grandchildren, because she was devoted. Will you stand up, hon? Kay looks a little tired there because Kay drove all night from upstate New York. I don't know how many of you know how big this state is, but it's big, just to meet Sylvia. And Kay has some questions as to the whereabouts of her 24-year-old daughter, Amy. And can you just tell us a little bit about her?
Amy was 20 and she'd met this guy and went to Florida, and then she called like 2 or 3 weeks later and said she'd left him and was afraid he was going to kill her, and no one's seen or heard from her since. He's now in jail for murder of someone else.
Do you feel she was
She's
murdered?
gone. I feel he killed her.
Yeah, she's gone, honey.
And
She's gone.
he swears he didn't do it.